Hello and welcome to the presentation that I have brought here today. My name is James Cordiner, and my presentation today is called Fear is Illusion. My website is freeyourmindne.com. First and foremost, thank you to the organizers of this event, Brandon, Nate, Douglas. Thank you to the rest of the wonderful speakers and presenters that are also taking part in this wonderful conference. It's truly an honor to be involved with this, to have been invited, and I can't express the gratitude enough. So here it is, my presentation, and it's something that I really worked hard on. So here we go. As I did for my first ever presentation last year at Shattering the Illusion, and what I will continue doing, I dedicate this presentation for my children. May there one day be shade under which you can sit. Shall we begin? As is tradition with this style of presentations, I will now list a few caveats. Number one, the information that I present may be hard to hear, let alone believe. So I implore you, the viewer or listener, to look into this topic for yourself, or these topics, as we'll find out for yourself. Do not just believe me. Number two, my presentation style is not for everyone, but this information is, so please listen until the end, because, number three, at some point during this presentation, you may feel as though I am describing you. I say good. If you find yourself feeling that way, good. Let this day be the last day that you feel this way. My general thesis for my presentation is that the majority of fear felt among the aggregate of the human population of Earth is manufactured in order to keep us in a condition of slavery. The repudiation of fear is the destruction of slavery. And as a clever acronym, FEAR, F.E.A.R, could stand for Fabricated Evidence Appearing Real. So I find it pertinent for this presentation to jump right into one way that the brain works, a common thing that has been referred to as the stimulus response process. And here we see to the right a picture of the brain with a few different parts highlighted or pointed at. When someone experiences a stressful event, the amygdala, which is an area of the brain that contributes to the emotional processing, sends a distress signal to the hypothalamus. This area of the brain functions like a command center, communicating with the rest of the body through the nervous system so that the person has the energy to fight or flee. Last year for my presentation, I took a pretty heavy deep dive into the hypothalamus. I suggest people go and look that up. It's called, this is my previous presentation, called ADHD, A Modern Attack on Free Thinkers. The hypothalamus is a bit like a command center. This area of the brain communicates with the rest of the body through the autonomic nervous system, which controls such involuntary body functions as breathing, blood pressure, heartbeat, and the dilation or constriction of key blood vessels and small airways in the lungs called bronchioles or bronchioles, if you're south of the border. So this is basically homeostasis. The autonomic nervous system has two components: the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system functions like a gas pedal in a car. It triggers the fight or flight response, providing the body with a burst of energy so that it can respond to perceived dangers. The parasympathetic nervous system acts like a brake. It promotes the, quote, rest and digest, unquote, response that calms the body down after the danger has passed. So think of the sympathetic nervous system and try to picture, maybe you've seen something like somebody dodging a car, like they're about to be hit by a car, and they just dodge out of the way like they have some sort of superpower. This is a low-level superpower, or I don't know if I would stick with calling it low level, but nonetheless, it certainly acts that way, where they are out of the way of the vehicle before they even have the time to process exactly what has happened. You see, that's how the sympathetic nervous system acts. Moving on. So after the amygdala sends a distress signal, the hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system by sending signals through the autonomic nerves to the adrenal glands. These glands respond by pumping the hormone epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, into the bloodstream. As epinephrine circulates through the body, it brings on a number of physiological changes. The heart beats faster than normal, pushing the blood to the muscles, the heart, and other vital organs. Pulse rate and blood pressure go up. The person undergoing these changes also starts to breathe more rapidly. Small airways in the lungs open wide. This way, the lungs can take in as much oxygen as possible with each breath. Extra oxygen is sent to the brain, increasing alertness. Sight, hearing, and other senses become sharper. Meanwhile, epinephrine triggers the release of blood sugar, or glucose, and fats from temporary storage sites in the body. These nutrients flood into the bloodstream, supplying energy to all parts of the body. So, too many people are unable to find a way to put the brakes on stress. Chronic low-level stress keeps the HPA axis activated. So the HPA axis is HPA stands for hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenaline. So the HPA axis so chronic low-level stress keeps that active, and much like a motor that is idling too high for too long. After a while, this has an effect on the body that contributes to the health problems associated with chronic stress. Persistent epinephrine surges can damage blood vessels and arteries, increasing blood pressure and raising risk of heart attacks or strokes. Elevated cortisol levels create physiological changes that help to replenish the body's energy stores that are depleted during the stress response, but they inadvertently contribute to the buildup of fat tissue and to weight gain. For example, cortisol increases appetite, so that person will want to eat more to obtain extra energy. It also increases storage of unused nutrients as fat. This process can be tamed like the wild beast it seems to be. Most of the time, the space between the initial stimulus and the resulting reaction can be elongated. This training serves the purpose of truly turning the reaction to the stimulus into a true response. In order to understand what I'm getting at here, we will need to define our terms. So we'll get into some etymology here. Etymology is a cool way of bringing a word back to its roots to discover just how they were formed, to give us a better understanding of how they should be used or how they were originally used. So respond, from the Latin respondere or respondere, is respond, answer to, promise in return. So from which back, plus spondere, to pledge. And react is of the Latin regere. So again, back, and agere, to do or perform. So react could mean to perform again, or do a second time. Now, if you looked up these words in a thesaurus, it would show you that they are synonyms, but any good thesaurus will tell you that most synonyms are actually words that have similar or closely related meaning, but are not perfect substitutes for each other under all circumstances. And yes, this is most definitely the case here. The stimulus response process is completely different than the stimulus react process. Let's take a look a little deeper into this to discover that difference. Hopefully, this will give us better, clearer vision at the problem in hopes to find the solution. Here we have a little guy being led along like with a carrot. So here's a, I guess you'd call it a flow chart that I've made. And so at the top we have the stimulus, okay, and that would be the input. And let's go to the left. Let's go left first. So this would be the part of the tree that leads us to an actual response. So stimulus, and then if we practice conscious thought, we would actually be gaining knowledge. We'd be, gaining some knowledge about what is going on, the situation at hand. And then from there, we would be able to do a little bit of processing of that. And we would, from an individual basis, gain an understanding. So this would be the logic phase. And then from there, we go another step forward. This would be, then we would have what we do, which would be the output. This would be a response, which is knowledge put into action, otherwise known as wisdom. So, a little Easter egg there of the trivium method of truth discovery. So we're going to start out right away with talking about a solution to the entire problem. The trivium method of truth discovery is a wonderful thing to practice on an individual basis to gain a better understanding of the world around you and to understand how your actions may affect those around you, and to have a better outcome would be to actually think about the things that you're doing and the situations that you're in. So maybe we'll talk more about that later. Stay tuned. Let's go right now. Let's go back to the top. Stimulus is the input. And so then to the right, we have lack of consciousness, which would lead one to be acting out of instinct, which leads one, which would be, also we would be acting in confusion. Okay. So the lack of consciousness acts as a catalyst to acting the fool and being confused. And then from there, where do we go? Prescribed action. So things that you're doing that you were told to do. Training, so you're trained to do things. Programming. These are all, again, they're interchangeable. And that is the way of the ad verecundium, which is the appeal to authority fallacy. So you're basically doing what you're told. Some authority figure that may not know what they're talking about is telling you what to do. And you say to yourself, well, they're a scientist, so I'm going to do what the scientist tells me to do, but they're not even the scientist in the field in which the problem has been created. But more on that later. And then from there, finally, we have the reaction, which would be just following orders, right? So that would be the output in this case. And then we can discern from there that, yes, indeed, the person following this path is dead in thought. So let's talk about this. Fear is illusion. Well, if fear is illusion, who are the ones, either overtly or covertly, intentionally or not, pulling the strings on this magical act? Any great illusionist will tell you We never reveal just how our tricks are done. A great magician never reveals how his tricks are done. But with an open mind and a tremendous amount of persistence, we can not only learn who they are or how they do their tricks, we can also learn how to stop falling for the act. And here's a meme that I made, and it's pretty silly. That is the guy from The Wizard of Oz, and I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. We got to look into it, folks. We got to tackle these problems head on and look into it for ourselves and figure out what's going on. So here we have what I am calling the wheel of intraspecific kleptoparasites. An intraspecific kleptoparasite is a member of our own species who, through whatever desires, selfish or otherwise, mostly selfish, decides to take from others within our own species for their own good. That's why it's intraspecific kleptoparasites. At the top, we have bankers, and then from there, corporations, and then from there, government. Government's at the top of the wheel. They're the initial push, if you will. So let's talk about government, shall we? At the top of the pile, here we have government, the happiest group of psychos in the entire world. While doing backroom deals and stealing the property of each of the populations that they have gotten control over, governments all over the world exercise their, quote, authority, unquote, through trickery and any other deceptive process that you can think of. Authority is in quotes because, well, it's not legitimate. It's perceived that way, but it's not truly legitimate. So it has to be in quotes. Governments all over the world are part of an intergenerational organized crime syndicate. They prey upon the willfully ignorant, seemingly to no end. These psychos are jealous of our ability to feel emotions, our ability to create strong bonds with the other non-psychos. Ultimately, and this is important, ultimately, they are the most afraid. They are afraid of what may happen if we learned how to unite, if we learned how to live according to natural law, and not only learned how to do that, but then we actually go and do it. Okay? So next, we will look at some of the more specific compartmentalized sections of the quote, United States government, those in government who generate the fear. On the left, we have a list of the domestic agencies, and on the right, we have some of the international agencies. There's less on the right and international because, well, a lot of the ones that we have here domestically are basically mirrored in other countries. So we have a lot here to go over. I just want to list them off. We have CIA, FBI, the NRO, which is the National Reconnaissance Office, NSA, the DOD, which is the Department of Defense, formerly the Department of War, the DHS, DEA, DOE, which this one is the Department of Energy, the EPA, OSHA, NIH, DOE again, but this time it's Department of Education, the CFR, which is the Council on Foreign Relations. I listed the three branches of government here, the judicial, legislative, and executive branches, FEMA, FDA, IRS, and the CDC. On the international side, we have NATO, the CFR, again, Council on Foreign Relations. I put them in both because, well, We do a lot with it domestically, but it's also geared toward what we do internationally. So I figured it would be best to have it in both lists. A little crossover action there. The Bilderberg Group, which is Europe and North America, big wigs, the annual meetup. The WEF, the WHO, and the UN. And these are basically who we can expect to be behind a lot of these problems. And boy, are they. More and more evidence keeps coming out every single day that proves this point, if you would just look. So I have this other meme here, and I just want to, kind of put this out there. I will not lie down. I will not go quietly. I will not submit. I will not roll over. I will not comply. I will not sit down, and I will not shut up, no matter what you people do. That's called defiance, folks. Get with it. Government itself is a religion. This is why I personally see it necessary to include all organized religions in this section. This does not mean spirituality is included. You do not need to be a religionist to be spiritual. And no, this does not make me or any other that understands this an atheist, okay? So you can hang that up right now. Understanding natural law and spirituality has no gatekeepers. We all have an individual relationship and an interconnected relationship with the universe, God, or whatever name you give to the force of creation here. All right? Religion created hell, for instance, to make you fear dying. Religions threaten you with eternal punishment because they cannot survive without your fear. Fear is the currency of control. Remember I mentioned intraspecific kleptoparasites, right? This is what they do. They feed off your energy. We'll get into that. Next, government is an egregore. According to the author Gaëtan Delaforgem, this psychic, astral, and autonomous entity, an egregore, will continue as long as thought energy feeds it, but it does not have to be the same people feeding energy for the entity to continue and eventually become independent. Egregores can be kept alive when new generations add their thought energy to the entity. Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Spirit of Christmas are all egregores, as are the Devil and the Grim Reaper. The egregore connects the people who created it to the psychic energy which created it. It influences others as well. Adolf Hitler used the hatred and anger in the minds of the German people after the defeat in World War II to create an egregore, focusing that energy. A fad in popular culture is a temporary and very potent egregore. In 1896, a Frenchman by the name of Gustave Le Bon wrote a book called The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. In the book, Le Bon shows how an individual on his own may act with the highest moral character and compassionate heart, but in a crowd, that same individual can be swept away and behave as a total blockhead, losing the sense of his own personal integrity to the energy of the crowd. The, quote, lynch mob mentality, unquote, is an excellent example here. Wall Street is another example of the crowd mentality, when a few manipulators sell strategically and the whole market plummets, right? A small group can create an egregore, and that psychic energy can spread to the crowd who mindlessly follow. The crowd egregore arises quickly. Its passion carries the crowd, but because the crowd is not an organized, stable group with intention, the demon egregore is quickly dissipated. As a psychic entity, the egregore exists between the material and spiritual worlds and is connected to both. It is a creation of the psychic objectives of the members of the group and exists as a connection to the divine. Anyone involved in a group, whatever kind of group it is, will be affected by the egregore of the group. For those that reach for a spiritual connection, the egregore assists and facilitates that connection. This process is unconscious, but it is intensified through the initiation process. which is designed to open the mind to the spiritual through the egregore. And this was from the Understanding the Occult, What is an Egregore by Theron Dune. It was a blog post written December 26, 2008, posted in the Illuminati News website. The same is true of any organization, though, be it a church or civil rights movement, the Ku Klux Klan, the Taliban, or a monastery or government anywhere. Whether the group is organized to do good or evil, indoctrination can happen quickly. As Gustave Le Bon pointed out, reason is not part of the crowd mentality. Becoming caught up in the passionate hatred or love of an egregore can be hard to resist. An organized group with a very strong intention builds and maintains an egregore with its passion, and the thought form affects new initiates. The power of the egregore to help and sustain a group increases over time through the repeated actions, ceremonies, or rituals of its members. The egregore can raise its members from the material and connect them to the divine or to the depths of human depravity. Does that not sound? Anyways, let's take that for what it is, folks. So, governments all around the world use a method of control known as problem, reaction, solution. So, problem, the government creates or exploits a problem, then attributes blame to others. Reaction, the populace reacts by asking the government for protection and help solving the problem. Solution, the government offers the solution that was planned by them long before the crisis occurred. The outcome is rights and liberties are exchanged for the illusion of protection and help. So next on the wheel, we have the media. Let's go over the forms of media. We have social networks, Hollywood movies, podcasts, television, the news, including the papers, These are just the most, the ones that come to mind first. The term media is actually plural for medium. As a noun in this context, a medium is a means of sharing or communicating information. And now we also can think of psychic mediums. So it's a little interesting there, huh? In the problem, reaction, solution method of control, the media serves as the communicators of what the reaction should be to the problem and what possible solutions should be acceptable. The government to media pipeline is very clear if you would just look. For instance, many of the talking heads that you see on the quote news, including those that are guests, are former members of the different agencies and arms of the government. Some are even Rhodes scholars. This is not the presentation for this, but it's an interesting connection. This pipeline directly affects the level of truth, if any, that you are receiving from this fourth branch of government. It is overwhelmingly clear that the established narrative is directly handed down from on high to these different, quote, news organizations. Those passing the message down aren't only government, but also major corporations that may be considered, quote, private sector, unquote. We see these corporations all the time as these channels sponsors. Brought to you by, insert big pharma company here. So here we have a depiction of Plato's cave. But to go on, most, if not all, of the supposed quote-unquote experts that are brought onto mainstream media news outlets are either former government officials or they are a high-ranking board member from some corporation. Even worse, many of those high-ranking members of these corporations previous to holding that position held a position at a government agency. For example, there are board members for certain big pharma companies who were formerly high-ranking officials at the FDA. As another example, Lockheed Martin has several quote-unquote retired military members currently serving on their board of directors right now. Okay, so as far as you guys, out there listening to this, maybe some of you are privy to this or that you know about this already, but, when you're working for something like some somebody, a agency like the FDA, and you're you're basically shilling for like Pfizer or Moderna or something like that, like, or Eli Lilly, and then next thing you know, you helped pass regulations, or you were approving their drugs. Remember, every drug that was discontinued by the FDA was first approved by the FDA. So when you're working closely with these big pharma corporations, then next thing you know, when you're done working for the FDA, because you did so many deals with their company, they welcome you on as a high-ranking member on the board of, on their boards of directors. This is all proof. This is all the proof that we need to draw upon to conclude that it is highly likely these people served in government with extreme conflict of interest. Now they parade around on television telling the public what to think. God bless America. God bless America. So Plato's cave, the story goes a little something like this. Prisoners chained to a wall. One of them escapes, sees they're all watching the shadows. So the prisoners are chained to the wall. They're all watching shadows being cast on the wall. They think this is what outside world looks like outside the cave. One of the prisoners escapes and sees what real life up at the top, what real life really is. He goes, oh my God, this is insane. I got to go back. I got to tell them the truth. I got to tell them the truth. He gets back there, tells them the truth, and they fucking kill him. The mainstream media knowingly participates in purveying propaganda to the masses. They are the influencers that get the general public whipped up into a frenzy in order to sell the latest psyop. This is very important to understand. Their entire purpose is to control your perception. There are 5 main categories of psyops. Thank you, Mark. Number 1, demoralization. Number 2, false flag. Number 3, disinformation. Number 4, stand down. And number 5 is worldview. You guys want a better understanding of this? Mark Passio gave an excellent presentation last year at Shattering the Illusion about this topic. I suggest you go look it up. It's called An Introduction to PsyOps. You can find it on his website, whatonearthishappening.com. All of these PsyOps all ultimately serve the same purpose. When it is time to feel fear, when it is time to trade more freedom for safety, you will. Let's go over social media real quick. So much like the media seen on television, social media platforms too have been knowingly infiltrated by an overwhelming amount of the, quote, former government, in quotes, intelligence, because they're not intelligent at all, the government intelligence agents. So much so that it is hard to believe that this is unintentional. The government has even been caught, quote unquote, overstepping their boundaries with these supposed private companies who receive government funding. So yeah, there's some shady shit going on there. Social media plays an important role in conjuring up fear in the masses. However, it is not as obvious as the mainstream media. After the mainstream media has successfully sown division amongst the people, social media allows for the creation of echo chambers, which are spaces in which the opposing sides can further their mission of hatred for one another by insulating themselves from any opposing views and opinions. This is how cults begin to form, people. Okay? Also, it is important to note social media seeks to dig the claws of control even deeper by censoring speech. This allows these platforms to participate in continuing the buildup of narratives that the public should view as truth. Oftentimes, these narratives couldn't be further from the truth. Am I speaking into an echo chamber right now? Oh, the alternative media. Even members of the alternative media space knowingly put out information in order to run a distraction campaign on your mind in order to get you all worked up over things that can be proven to be false or just blatantly inconsequential. These influencers are what is known as controlled opposition. Controlled opposition refers to any person or organization that appears to be on one side but is secretly working against the interests of that movement. It was originally coined to describe government agents who would infiltrate activist movements and subvert them from within. The term has come to describe any activist or organization that isn't actually working for the side they claim. Much of the content in alt media space is nothing more than clickbait garbage. It is intentionally put out in order to distract the people who choose to watch or listen to it, to distract them from the truth. Whether it can be proven that these influencers actually work for the feds is up for debate. Okay? I'll be fair with that. However, if that is not the case, that would mean that these influencers are unwitting participants in many psyops, which I personally believe is to be worse. It's worse. They're unwitting. That's so much worse. It is that consideration that places them in this category of controlled opposition. Okay? The truth is, we are all enslaved on this planet. And until that problem is solved, all other problems come second. I don't care what your BS tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist mind wants to tell you about your thing being the most important, what shape this fucking place is, what's going on in the skies, what's going on in the ocean. I don't care what it is. Until the problem of slavery is solved, none of that other shit matters. Get it through your thick heads. Grow up. We get to Hollywood now. Yes, even the movies and television fiction hold sway over our perception of the truth. Oftentimes, movies and television programs propagandize the masses into behaving certain ways. This method of control is often called predictive programming. This was first described and proposed by researcher Alan Watt, who defines predictive programming as predictive programming is a subtle form of psychological conditioning provided by the media to acquaint the public with planned societal changes to be implemented by our leaders. If and when these changes are put through, the public will already be familiarly I can't say it, familiarized, let's just go with that, with them and will accept them as natural progressions, thus lessening possible public resistance and commotion. Even more often, this method is disregarded as just another crazy conspiracy theory. Another term given to the masses is a trauma-based mind control trigger word meant to shut down an individual's own ability to even begin to think for oneself. In other words, the use of this term as a pejorative is meant to induce an automated reaction in the NPC buyer of the next current thing, that reaction being one of willful ignorance. Trust the science, anyone? You get me? And I know a moment ago I was using that term, but got to get those people's attention. You got to call it what it is. So we're going to do this section, alpha versus beta. In November of 1969, a researcher named Herbert Krugman, who later became manager of public opinion research at General Electric headquarters in Connecticut, decided to try to discover what goes on physiologically in the brain of a person watching TV. Flicking on the TV, Krugman began monitoring the brain waves of the subject. What he found through repeated trials was that within about 30 seconds, the brain waves switched from predominantly beta waves indicating alert and conscious attention to predominantly alpha waves indicating an unfocused, receptive lack of attention. The state of aimless fantasy and daydreaming below the threshold of consciousness. When his subject turned to reading through a magazine, beta waves reappeared, indicating that conscious and alert attentiveness had replaced the daydreaming state. Further research revealed that the brain's left hemisphere, which processes information logically and analytically, tunes out while the person is watching TV. This tuning out allows the right hemisphere of the brain, which processes information emotionally and non-critically, to function unimpeded. There's nothing new about reports that TV puts people in a trance, although for understandable reasons, it is not a subject that gets much coverage on the network evening news. Frames per second, or FPS, or frame rates, have only increased in the modern day. With an increase of FPS, frames per second, comes an increase in the success of subconscious absorption of the content being shown. To sum it up, the frame rates of a television puts one in a dissociative state of mind. While in that state, one is vulnerable to the trance-like acceptance of what they are being shown on the screen. Thank you very much to Fritz Springmeier for his work, his book, How the Illuminati Create... I'm sorry. I'll hold it up here. It's called How the Illuminati Create a Total Mind Control Slave. Dissociation is used as a defense to protect a person from overwhelming pain and trauma. It is a natural ability of the brain. Hypnosis or hypnotic trance is a form of dissociation. The mind naturally hypnotizes itself under various conditions. Okay? During shock or stress, the body's limbic, hypothalamic, pituitary adrenal system releases substances which encode all the internal and external pieces of information being sensed into a deep level of consciousness. These memories often become dissociated from normal states of consciousness. In other words, when the mind-body returns to the state where it was during shock and stress, the mind can reaccess those memories. However, until the mind returns to this shocked state, it doesn't pick up the information it has embedded. So, by watching these Hollywood productions, the weak-minded are walking into a trap. What is shown on the screen is often meant to trigger this shock stress, and in turn, when similar events happen in real life, whether orchestrated or not, there is no shortage of predictive programmed reactions given to the masses to act out. Okay, I want to clear something up here. It is not so much about the events themselves being shown on the screen, even though there does exist an eerie amount of similarities between the fiction on screen and the supposed, quote, facts of reality. Rather, what needs to be given attention here is the reaction of the NPC sheep characters in the stories to the events of the stories. Okay? It is this that is imparted onto the viewer the most, given the amount of relatability that is often found in the characters, the relatability that the viewer sees in the character. They see themselves in the character on screen. So, you know, the events aren't always the same, but the reaction to similar events, you know, is what you're absorbing. Okay? Next on the wheel of intraspecific kleptoparasites is schooling. Some call it public education. However, more accurate descriptions would be government indoctrination camp or the slave factory. If you are going to run game on an entire population, you need to make sure they are each ready to be a dupe. What better way to do that than to train them from the earliest of ages to believe in, quote, unquote, authority? Just what is it that they are doing in those prison-like buildings? Why, they be making slaves, of course. Brought to you by their sponsor, F.E.A.R. Hidden behind all the deceptive altruism is a dark and disturbing truth, a truth that squeezes like a vice upon the minds of the most defenseless among us, our children. On one side, the vice is made up of a desire to hijack a child's imagination. On the other, a trick that perpetuates a certain set of childish characteristics that any individual may possess. Public school, in the meme here, public school is great for socialization. Where else can your children be routinely exposed to drugs, bullying, obedience training, shame, abnormal isolation with a single age group, consumerism, disconnected communication, and authoritarianism? Yeah, big thumbs up to that. Woohoo. There's one thing that the schools are teaching our children is one logical fallacy. And not our children, because I can't say our. Mine don't go there. The logical fallacy that they're being trained into is an appeal to the consequences of a belief. The main lesson taught in schools is this logical fallacy, and here is how it works. X is true because if people did not accept X as being true, then there would be negative consequences. In other words, government is necessary because without government, there would be chaos and disorder. This line of reasoning is fallacious because the consequences of a belief have no bearing on whether the belief is true or false. For example, if someone were to say, if 16-headed purple unicorns don't exist, then I would be miserable. So they must exist because I'm not miserable. It would be clear that this would be a good line of reasoning. It is important to note that the consequences in question are the consequences that stem from the belief. It is important to distinguish between a rational reason to believe, or RRB, with evidence, and a prudential reason to believe, PRB, motivation. Motivation. A RRB, or rational reason to believe, is evidence that is objectively and logically supports the claim. A PRB, or prudential reason to believe, is a reason to accept the belief because of some external factor, such as fear, a threat, or a benefit of harm that may stem from the belief. That is relevant to what a person values, but is not relevant to the truth or falsity of the claim. I love the memes, folks. This is flag worship, because making people bow to a golden statue is just a little too obvious. So I'm a huge fan of John Taylor Gatto. Anyone that knows my work in recent times knows this by now. He's like a hero to me. So for the next couple of slides, I just took excerpts from the speech that he gave in 1991 when he was accepting the New York State School Teacher of the Year award. And this is called the 7-Lesson School Teacher. And these are all his words what I'm about to read. And he said, "These are the things I teach. These are the things you pay me to teach. Make of them what you will." Number 1, confusion. I teach the unrelating of everything, an infinite fragmentation, the opposite of cohesion. What I do is more related to television programming than to make a scheme of order. In a world where home is only a ghost because both parents work, or because of too many moves, or too many job changes, or too much ambition, or because something else has left everybody too confused to maintain a family relation, I teach students how to accept confusion as their destiny. That's the first lesson I teach. Number 2, class position. I teach that students may stay in the class where they belong. I don't know who decides my kids belong there, but that's not my business. The children are numbered so that if any get away, they can be returned to the right class. Over the years, the variety of ways children are numbered by schools has increased dramatically until it is hard to see the human beings plainly under the weight of the numbers they carry. Numbering children is a big and very profitable undertaking, though what the strategy is designed to accomplish is elusive. I don't even know why parents would, without a fight, allow it to be done to their kids. We'll find out why in a minute. But yeah, so it's not about classrooms so much as it's about sort of like the Indian caste system where you're in a social class, middle class, lower class. You get the point. Number 3, indifference. And this is possibly, in my opinion, one of the more disturbing ones. I teach children not to care too much about anything, even though they want to make it appear that they do. How I do this is very subtle. I do it by demanding that they become totally involved in my lessons, jumping up and down in their seats with anticipation, competing vigorously with each other for my favor. It is heartwarming when they do that. It impresses everyone, even me. When I'm at my best, I plan lessons very carefully in order to produce this show of enthusiasm. But when the bell rings, I insist that they drop whatever it is we have been doing and proceed quickly to the next workstation. They must turn on and off like a light switch. Nothing important is ever finished in my class, nor in any class that I know of. Students never have a complete experience except on the installment plan. Number 4, emotional dependency. They just get worse and worse as they go, folks. By stars and red checks, smiles and frowns, prizes, honors, and disgraces, I teach kids to surrender their will to the predestinated chain of command. Rights may be granted or withheld by any authority without appeal, because rights do not exist inside a school, not even the right of free speech, as the Supreme Court has ruled, unless school authorities say they do. This is like public shaming rituals, okay? That's what number 4 is. Number 5, intellectual dependency. Gatto says, good students wait for a teacher to tell them what to do. This is the most important lesson of them all. We must wait for other people, better trained than ourselves, to make the meanings of our lives. The expert makes all the important choices. Only I, the teacher, can determine what my kids must study. Or rather, only the people who pay me can make those decisions, which I then enforce. Number 6, provisional self-esteem. The lesson of report cards, grades, and tests is that children should not trust themselves or their parents, but should instead rely on the evaluation of certain certified officials. People need to be told what they are worth. Number 7, one can't hide. I teach students that they are always watched, that each is under constant surveillance by me and my colleagues. There are no private spaces for children. There is no private time. Finally, on the wheel of interest-specific kleptoparasites, we have order followers. Order followers serve, well, we'll find out. Is it only the military, police, and government intelligence agents who are order followers? No. In order for the problem reaction solution method of control to work, sure, you're going to need enforcers. You're also going to need willfully ignorant people who will bend over and take it just so that they can get on with whatever creature comforts they may have been enjoying before the problem. It is the order followers blindly obeying that completes the wheel. They are the final bit of inertia that the wheel requires to not only complete its rotation, but to continue rotating indefinitely. The entire wheel has been built for this purpose, to create willing slaves who are too afraid to fight back. But no, it does not need to stay this way. I'm going to read an excerpt from The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. 1896. It is easy to imbue the mind of crowds with a passing opinion, but very difficult to implant therein a lasting belief. However, a belief of this latter description once established, it is equally difficult to uproot it. It is usually only to be changed at the cost of violent revolutions. Even revolutions can only avail when the belief has almost entirely lost its sway over men's minds. In that case, revolutions serve to finally sweep away what had already been cast aside, though the force of habit prevented its complete abandonment. The beginning of a revolution is in reality the end of a belief. The precise moment at which a great belief is doomed is easily recognizable. It is the moment when its value begins to be called into question. Every general belief being little else than a fiction, it can only survive on the conditions that it be not subjected to examination. I find a lot of myself in this meme here. I'd rather walk alone on a path of truth than to follow the beliefs of the mentally enslaved that refuse to critically think for themselves. Here we have just a little collage of memes that I find to be humorous and in a way where it's we cry, we laugh so we don't cry. Leave that up for just a moment. The willfully ignorant. There are many subgroups of willfully ignorant order followers. However, there is one group that is the worst. These people are at the front lines of inflicting abuse and trauma on the innocent. Anyone want to take a guess? Seriously. Seriously, I think there's a chat here. I think there's a live chat here. Anyone want to take a guess? Who's the one group that's the worst? Is it the politicians, the police, the military, the school teachers? Nope. No, it's not. Is it the millennials? Maybe. I'm just kidding. Okay. It's a joke. Or could it be? Is it the parents? Yeah, it's the parents. Too many parents are willing to sacrifice their children to the state. This is done at the start by letting medical personnel at the hospital conduct traumatizing medical procedures on a newborn baby, such as circumcision, followed swiftly by sending them to government indoctrination camps known as public school. They support and encourage their children when that child, mostly due to the traumatizing experiences that they endure throughout their childhoods, decides to become either a police officer, a member of the military, or even a politician. Parents are the first front line of defense for their children, a task that the majority of parents consistently fail. Not only do they fail, they have grown to expect the state to raise their children for them so they can focus on what they consider more important. Maybe that's the money that they earn at their job. Maybe it's their social life. Or worse, maybe they're just too lazy. No matter the reason as to why they abuse and abandon their children in such a manner, it is wrong. It is wrong. And spare me the whole not everybody can do it routine, because seriously, how dare you bring life into this world and not be ready to assume full responsibility for that life? Your lack of consciousness is an embarrassment. Okay? You should be ashamed of yourselves for doing this to your children, especially in this day and age when it's never been more apparent before in our entire lives. It's never been more in our face than it is right now, and people continue to do it. They are not willing to make any sacrifice, even for their own fucking children, and they should be ashamed of themselves. They go and they have this prescribed belief given to them that they just grow up and I just get a job, I get married, and then we have kids, and that's just what you do with life. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. But when that thing happens, whether whether you've been practicing conscious conception or not, the ability to be consciously raising your children because they're your responsibility and no one else's, that ability is dormant in all of us. It's just, are you willing to make the sacrifices that you need to make in order to ensure that your children are safe and are growing and actually being raised? Okay. And most people aren't ready to do that. And that is the number one issue that we have. Is it the police? Is it the military? Is it the school teachers? Is it the politicians? All of those people that are doing those jobs now were first children, and their parents raised them like shit. And now we live in a world where there's so much chaos because no one can even fucking get their shit together enough to be raising a family and doing the right thing. People aren't conscious of their choices. They lack consciousness of their choices. And it's why I've created the wheel, is because it all revolves around itself. It's the system, how it all revolves around itself. And we need to get off the wheel. We need to get out of there. Your boos mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes you cheer. You're pathetic. But all is not lost. We still have time. We can turn this all around. But it has to start today, right at this very moment. Each and every one of us have the chance to stand up and claim responsibility for our actions. And it all starts with one simple phrase. And I want all of you to say it if you need to. That phrase is, I was wrong. put your ego to the side and realize what is at stake here. Our future, our children's future, the freedom of future generations. Don't be a coward, okay? Don't be a coward. The fear of death is the inception of slavery. And the first step to changing the system is to stop complying with it. I'd like to end my presentation with reading this. It's the Litany Against Fear from Dune, written by Frank Herbert. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn to the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Oh, and one last thing. Don't ever be this guy. Chris Farley's hilarious, but you get the point. This has been my presentation for S.E.E.D 5 Metamorphosis of 2023. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for staying with me through this presentation. Can't believe I got this done in one shot. And I got it, Anyways, enough about that. It's not easy to hear some of the things that I said. And, but someone's got to say it. So thank you again. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you to the rest of the speakers. And as much vitriol was in my voice, I really do love all of you. All life is precious, and I think that I think that we can do this, guys. Let's get it together. All right.